Welcome back, everyone. Today we're covering the situation in Ukraine as of February 14th, 2026, and there is a considerable amount to work through. Let's begin with the Munich Security Conference, now in its second day, where Zelensky delivered a series of notable statements. Zelensky at Munich. Key statements. Zelensky expressed cautious hope regarding the trilateral meeting scheduled for the following week, describing them as potentially serious and substantive, though he acknowledged that at times the parties appear to be speaking about entirely different things. He raised a pointed concern about the framing of concessions in American-led discussions, noting that the conversation around concessions almost exclusively focuses on what Ukraine must give, with Russia rarely mentioned in the same context. He also flagged Europe's near absence from the negotiating table as a significant error, emphasizing that Ukraine is actively working to bring European interests and voices into the process. On military matters, Zelensky asserted that the Ukrainian army is currently the strongest in Europe, a claim that, assessed against NATO and EU members, appears defensible given the combat experience and scale of Ukraine's forces. He stated that Ukraine is prepared to reach an agreement, provided it delivers genuine, lasting peace for both Ukraine and Europe. He expressed confidence that the war could end this year, and with dignity. Whether that timeline is realistic is worth examining. Based on everything visible along the current line of combat contact, a more probable scenario is that the conflict extends into 2027. That said, 2026 has introduced something genuinely new to the pattern of this war. The annual general battle, and why 2026 is different. Looking back across the conflict, a clear pattern emerges. Each year has featured one defining large-scale engagement, what might be called a general battle. In 2022, there were effectively two: the hard Ukrainian counteroffensive in early autumn and the beginning of the battle for Bakhmut in late 2022. In 2023, the battle for Avdiivka began in the latter part of the year and concluded in early 2024. The year 2024 brought the battle for Chasiv Yar, followed by the Russian Kursk counteroffensive, launched in late 2024 and concluded at the start of 2025. In 2025, the general battle centered on the cities of Pokrovsk and Velika Novosilka. The consistent pattern is that these defining battles begin at the end of one year and conclude at the start of the next. What makes 2026 different is that its general battle began at the very start of the year, and that battle is unfolding in eastern Zaporizhzhia. How Russia set the stage, and Ukraine's response. By the end of 2025, Russian forces had made substantial gains to the west of Velika Novosilka, established full control over Huly-Eifeld, crossed the Huai River, and pushed through the next Ukrainian defensive line, penetrating deep into Ukrainian-controlled territory beyond the river. However, as 2026 opened, Ukraine launched a counter-offensive operation in response. Initial reporting was contradictory. Some sources denied any Ukrainian counterattack was occurring, while others reported significant Ukrainian advances. One confirmed development is that Russian forces lost access to Starlink terminals in the area, which has created a significant information gap. Clarity on what is actually happening has only begun to emerge over the past day or so. The situation as of February 14th. Comparing the map from the end of February 13th to the end of February 14th, Ukrainian forces have advanced, though the more precise description is that Ukrainian units have infiltrated Russian positions and moved toward the settlements of Kalinivske, Nova Mykolaiivka, Birova, and Chervon. The updated gray zone appearing on pro-Ukrainian maps reflects a report published that morning, showing expanded Ukrainian-controlled or contested territory extending southward. The first video evidence of this counteroffensive came from pro-Russian sources during the day. The footage shows Ukrainian forces entering territory previously held by Russian units, vehicles pushing south, and Russian FPV drones striking Ukrainian armor. including one vehicle confirmed hit at a specific identified location. Understanding Ukraine's tactical approach. What Ukraine is doing now closely mirrors what it did during the 2024 Kursk offensive. Rather than pushing the front line forward in a conventional sense, Ukraine is executing rapid, deep infiltration raids. Mobile assault groups are tasked with advancing as far as possible, seizing strongholds, checkpoints, temporary deployment points, tree lines, and fortifications, and then digging in when they meet organized resistance. The objective is depth, not width. This contrasts sharply with Russian offensive doctrine, which functions like a press, advancing on a broad front, refusing to bypass pockets of resistance, and pushing until each obstacle is eliminated before continuing. Ukraine's approach is flexible and fast. Russia's is methodical and grinding. In the current operation, Ukrainian forces most likely launched from Velika Mikhailivka, outflanked the settlement of Sosnivka and two nearby strongholds, and pushed to the point where they were engaged by Russian drones and halted. A second axis appears to have launched from Polohivska, outflanked the settlement of Hai, passed through Nova Oleksandrivka and Kadena, and continued southeast toward Vishneva, where Ukrainian forces again outflanked surrounding villages and pushed toward key logistical nodes. Pro-Ukrainian and pro-Western mappers have colored large portions of this territory as fully under Ukrainian armed forces control, as though thousands of Russian soldiers simply vanished overnight. That is not what is happening. What is happening is a series of deep infiltration movements. Ukraine's actual objective appears to be establishing control over a corridor, roughly 2 to 4 kilometers wide, running along what might be visualized as a yellow band across the operational area. Once that corridor is secured, Ukrainian main forces would be positioned to attack the encircled and cut off Russian settlements from the rear, creating something resembling a cauldron. Pilgora, Vishnive, and Nish are among the settlements potentially targeted in this manner. A significant Russian announcement. One development that appears to have been largely overlooked in broader coverage deserves attention. Pro-Russian sources published a report stating that the 29th Guards Combined Arms Army of the Vostok Group of Forces and the 11th Guards Air Force and Air Defense Army have been awarded the Order of Suvorov for mass heroism, valor, steadfastness, and courage demonstrated during combat operations. The significance: the area of responsibility of the 29th Army is located precisely where Ukraine's counteroffensive is unfolding. The award's citation, emphasizing mass heroism and steadfastness, strongly suggests that this army found itself encircled or near encircled during Ukraine's push and chose to hold its positions rather than withdraw. Heavy casualties are likely. The unit appears to still be fighting. This is a meaningful signal about the severity of the pressure Ukrainian forces are applying. The strategic stakes of this battle. This is the general battle of 2026. If Russia loses it, the implications are substantial. Russian plans for an offensive toward Zaporizhzhia city would likely need to be delayed until 2027. If Russia wins, its forces gain momentum for a faster push westward. A question worth raising: why are Russian forces not using aviation? Why have there been no large-scale combined missile and drone strikes against the logistical hubs, the cities along the Dnipro River, through which Ukraine is channeling reinforcements, reserves, equipment, and medical evacuations to support this counteroffensive? Russia clearly understands the importance of these supply lines. The silence suggests Russia is waiting. Available intelligence assessments from Western and neutral experts indicate that Russia has already completed preparations for another large-scale, combined missile and drone strike on Ukrainian energy infrastructure. When that strike comes, the most likely target is the Zaporizhzhia region specifically. Warehouses, ammunition depots, oil refineries, fuel storage, industrial zones, energy facilities, and particularly bridges. The goal would be to sever Ukrainian logistics and derail the counteroffensive before it can consolidate. There is another possible Russian logic at work. By not immediately crushing the Ukrainian counteroffensive in its early hours, Russia may be deliberately drawing Ukraine into committing as many forces as possible to this sector. The reasoning: the more forces Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi commits to Zaporizhzhia, the greater the eventual attrition and the more severe the manpower shortage Ukraine faces when Russian pressure intensifies. This is cold and patient thinking, if accurate. A precedent is worth noting. Several months ago, Ukraine launched a counteroffensive in the Chasiv Yar area and made significant gains, nearly recapturing the full city and its northern approaches. Eventually, Ukrainian forces reached a point where they halted, whether through exhaustion, orders, or both, and Russia responded with fresh forces, beginning a new offensive wave. The same pattern could repeat here. Other fronts. February 14th updates. Velika Novosilka direction. Pro-Ukrainian sources report Russian advances between the villages of Nova Malivka and Nova Poltavka. The likely intent is to outflank both fortified positions and strike Ukrainian forces from the rear. This sector warrants close monitoring. A localized breakthrough here could allow Russian forces to push toward Mayorsky and encircle Ukrainian units north of Nova Pavlivka. Sloviansk direction. Changes were recorded over the previous 24 hours. Russian forces are nearing completion of their battle for the first defensive layer along the M03 road, with only a small forested area remaining. Once cleared, Russian forces will push north toward Fedorivka, attacking from the west. Separately, Russian infiltration was reported south of Zakitny, with sabotage and reconnaissance groups advancing southward. This is a critical sector. The elevated terrain around Kaluzhine east of Sloviansk represents the most important Ukrainian defensive layer in the area. Loss of control here would likely force Ukrainian withdrawal all the way back to Oleksandrivka and Mykolaiivka. Northern directions: Vovchansk, Kupiansk. Pro-Russian sources confirmed Russian advances along the border between Zeleny High and Nizhnya, continuing south toward Vasilivka. Russian forces appear tasked with cutting the road between Liptsi and Vovchansk, with the goal of isolating the large forested area currently under Ukrainian control. Once that is achieved, Russian forces would likely turn toward Pomazki and a nearby Ukrainian settlement, attacking from the north and rear to encircle the forest zone. This would allow Russian forces to link the footholds around Liptsi and Vovchansk into a single, powerful combined position, and would effectively restore nearly all of the territory Russia lost during Ukraine's autumn 2022 counteroffensive. That is a strategically significant milestone if achieved. Looking ahead. In the coming days, Russian, Ukrainian, and American representatives are scheduled to meet in Geneva for further talks on a possible peaceful resolution to the conflict. Based on the position staked out by Zelensky at Munich, a breakthrough appears unlikely. The gap between what the parties are prepared to accept remains wide. We condemn all violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, leave a like, join on Patreon, and take care. Goodbye.